All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week where we're going to discuss the organization of the Federal Homeland Security Enterprise in America. All right, so there's 5 readings for this week. Uh, Obviously, I don't have time to get into all 5 of those, so I'm not going to discuss the Martin reading or the Caprone and Mizrahi readings for this video. Those two are mainly just discussions of how things are organized. So let's give you a really good background and discussion of how things are set up on the federal side. One thing to note, um, because things in Homeland Security change quickly and often, Caprona and Mizrahi have a list of agencies that are included in the intelligence community. That list has changed to also include Space Force intelligence. Okay, so please do note that when you're reading that. So without those two, that leaves us with Wise and Nader, Bratberg, and the Ritkers readings. Um, Please read the things to consider document before you go any further. Um, That'll really kind of help orient you um, to how I'd like you to kind of think about these readings as we go on. All right, so first we're going to talk about Wise and Nader. I'm sorry. Um, so admittedly, this article is fairly dated, um, but it does a really good job of outlining the different dimensions of the Homeland Security enterprise and outlining the types of issues that are present in the different dimensions. Um, Now, I would love to find a more recent article that kind of talks about where we are now, discussing these dimensions, but I haven't found one yet, and I have never found one that does as good a job of outlining these different dimensions. So that's why I still use it. But because this article is dated, it is useful to think about how the issues identified in the various dimensions have been addressed or haven't been addressed since the time of this writing. Okay, so kind of think about that while we're going through Wise and Nader. All right, so the first dilemma is related to the sheer number of organizations that are involved in both the government and the private sector when it comes to Homeland Security. Some of the issues that are related to this dilemma of this intergovernmental complexity have obviously been addressed with subsequent versions of the reports and policy documents that we read in the last couple of weeks, which is why I have you read those prior to us doing this. But this is obviously always going to be an issue for the Homeland Security enterprise. Organizing and managing the large numbers of agencies is always going to be an issue. So this is a dimension that still holds um, even today since the time of that writing. The second dilemma identified is the operational dilemma. So this dimension um, refers to how the various organizations of Homeland Security will respond to the many different types of disasters that Homeland Security is responsible for. Um, Obviously, agency roles and responsibilities, especially across all these levels of government, the private sector, this is really foundational to the success of any Homeland Security response. And like the first one, this issue has been addressed in the years since the publication of this article with various policy documents again that have been issued. But it remains a significant challenge to Homeland Security. Especially when you think about the local level, all these different levels. You have new people taking over agencies. You have agencies changing. You have not only new people taking over, but you have new political administrations that are changing. These agencies. Sometimes these people have very little experience. When they come in and occupy these positions. So uh, operationally, this is always going to be an issue for Homeland Security. All right, the third dimension posed by Wise and Nader is the financial dimension. The issue of who pays for what, that's always going to be an issue in Homeland Security. What should the locals pay for? What should the state pay for? What should the feds pay for? What kind of money is going to be available for state and local, to do what the feds want them to do? Like the financial aspects of this is always going to be an issue, and there's always going to be um, this kind of fighting and competing for money. All right, legal and regulatory is the next dilemma. This refers to the legal authority to conduct the mission of Homeland Security. Um, and this is also one that's obviously still an issue. Okay, this is the important dilemma that really gets at the heart of this freedom versus security argument. What can and can't the Department of Homeland Security do? What can and can't the intelligence community do? What can they compel the American people to do? So right now, this argument is playing out right before our eyes. We're talking about these COVID vaccines. Can the government compel people to get a vaccine? What does the Constitution allow the government to do? Earlier in the semester, we talked about definitions. This is where definitions get extremely important, right? What's a threat? What's terrorism? What is necessary? What about, how different groups are labeled? What about citizens versus non-citizens? Okay, all these things all come into play when you're talking about the legal and regulatory dilemma of Homeland Security. All right, so then you have the final dilemma, is the political dilemma. Homeland Security is inherently political. You'd obviously hope that the defense and security of the homeland would kind of transcend political ideologies, but it doesn't. You see that in the readings in the past week. You see it playing out in front of your eyes. What is identified as threats during different presidential regimes? What do different agencies focus on under different administrations? Now, obviously, these things are somewhat, or they're influenced by what's actually happening, but there's a lot of politics that are involved in this as well. And then you add in, you have all the politics that come into play at the various levels of government too, right? So think about all the different types of politics that can influence how the Homeland Security enterprise operates. Okay, so if you look at all these different dilemmas, some of those have obviously been addressed, but they're all still issues even today. All right, so that's kind of my quick hitter on Wise and Nader. So let's move on to Bratberg. So Bratberg discusses the coordination issues related to Homeland Security. Okay, he discusses this issue kind of relative to the contingent coordination framework and its 5 dimensions of coordination. And then later on, he provides commentary on how these various issues have been addressed. All right, so for the sake of time, I'm only going to discuss the 5 dimensions and then kind of leave it up to you to read the commentary and then think about how recent developments also would apply there. Okay, so the first is matching place and function. Okay, so this first dilemma is directly related to the organization of the many different actors that participate in the Homeland Security enterprise. The various entities are organized more hierarchically, federal to local rather than place-based, which means it's difficult to respond to any particular place at any point in time. Okay, so the argument is for more coordination and organization across the many different actors in the Homeland Security enterprise. I'm sure you'll agree that this has been happening in Homeland Security, but is it good enough? Okay, has enough been done in this dimension? This will always be a challenge. All right, the second one is how do you define a floor? Okay, so this dimension is related to how progress or success is measured. Excuse me. So what is the minimal level of preparedness that must be obtained? What do you measure successes and failures against? What's an acceptable level of preparedness and response? Okay, this is a common issue even in regular criminal justice agencies. How are you measuring things? What are you comparing them to? How do you, what is this minimal level that's acceptable? Okay, and then what's a success based on that? What's a failure based on that? Okay, all that matters when you're talking about policy and moving forward, what you're going to do, what you need to change. Like all those things matter. All right, third dimension is how to build a reliable learning system. How do agencies learn from past experiences? Okay, government agencies are not really good at wanting to change, and they're not really good at responding to disparate events because they want to do everything in a similar manner. and they want to respond to new incidents, how they responded to past incidents. Okay, so how do you create an agency that learns from past experiences and allows itself to respond to things in an appropriate way? The fourth dimension is how to balance the old with the new. How do the agencies that have new Homeland Security missions still perform their previous missions? How is that coordinated? Okay, so how do you balance what these agencies used to do with what they're doing now? And obviously, because this article is a little dated too, a lot of this has been worked out. But think about how you still have these kind of competing um, missions within these agencies. All right, and then the final dimension is how do you meet citizens' expectations in a fragmented system? So how do citizen expectations for protection preparedness mesh with the government's expectations and abilities? Okay, how do those things come together? How do you get to an agreement point with that? Okay, how does the government influence citizens' perceptions? What are some of the things that influence that? Um, what can the government do when they don't meet citizens' expectations? What if citizen expectations are too high? Okay, so that's always going to be kind of an issue when you're talking about homeland security or really like even criminal justice. Citizens expect that certain things can happen when maybe those things actually can't happen. Okay, so how do you deal with that? Okay, so some of these dilemmas, and that's the last dilemma. So some of these dilemmas have obviously been addressed to some degree, but all of them still persist within Homeland Security. All right, now the final article, we're gonna kind of go in a completely opposite direction here with this last article. So the final article is Richter's. I really like to provide both sides of an issue when I can, and this article does this to the T. Okay, so all the articles up to this point this week were about how things are organized and talking about what needs to happen, to modify it, make it better, etc. Rutgers argues that the Department of Homeland Security, its current form, should be abolished. Okay, and he does this by raising a number of important points in the article. One of the main arguments is that they attempted to fix bureaucratic problems by creating more bureaucracy, by creating this behemoth bureaucracy that is the Department of Homeland Security. And then by doing that, they created this unwieldy organization that's just chock full of inefficiency and waste. Okay, so some of his arguments are common issues related to most government agencies, but his argument is that they made this way worse by making this huge agency. Okay, so he goes on to discuss various components of DHS, programs and strategies, and makes arguments throughout for why the Department of Homeland Security should be disbanded, and the component organizations should just go back to their original parent organizations. I'm not going to go into all of them, but as you read it, think about the points he's making. Okay, as you're reading it, try to keep an open mind to what he's saying. Now, you don't have to agree with him, but really consider the points that he's making. Okay, a lot of these issues that he raises have validity to them. Okay, and they're kind of valid criticisms. Now, I'm not saying to consider valid criticisms that DHS should be disbanded, but think about the issues that he raises, and then really think about it: is disbanding DHS even a solution? Okay, is there a way to address these issues? Because you're talking about to disband it, you're talking about another huge governmental reorganization, right? So, is there a way to address these issues without another huge governmental reorganization, or would the reorganization be worth it? Right? Would that be necessary because either that's a better way to organize Homeland Security, or maybe you can think of a better way. Maybe Homeland Security should be, set up a different way that you can think of. Okay, so think about all those things while you're reading. While you're reading all of them, but really while you're reading Richter's, think about the issues that he's raising, and then think about it in relation to DHS, and really kind of critically think about: are we doing this the right way, or do we do this just because this is what government always does? All right, so with that, I'm going to stop for the week. Be sure to complete your assignments. And as always, please let me know if you have questions. Also, I'm trying to determine how many people actually are watching my videos all the way to the end. So if you reach this point in the video, please email me the word Richters, and you'll receive 2 bonus points. All right, I'll see you next week.